Good evening, New York. Welcome to tonight's entertainment. The changing of the guard. Tonight, the good old days are coming back.
With the good comes the bad. Anyways, welcome back, true believers and all you spectacular Spidey fans, to another very intriguing Spider-Man PS4 related video. Now, if you do recall, this is actually a follow-up to a previous video I put out almost a month ago talking about the top 5 best DLC moments within Spider-Man PS4's City That Never Sleeps pack. And even though it did take a while to get to this moment, after we talked about the top 5 best moments, we are now back again talking about the top 5 worst ones. So if you do want to check out my previous list of the top 5 best DLC moments, I will leave a link to that in the description below. But basically, to catch you all up, I did in fact choose the top 5 worst moments throughout the entirety of each chapter of the City That Never Sleeps pack, with the heist, turf wars, and silver lining. Now, as for this list itself, it will contain both aspects from the side missions and main missions that were included within the DLC, and even though this is all just my own opinion, I do think we can at least agree on the majority of some of these picks. Still, just to remind all of you that this is my own unique opinion, and this is how I personally viewed all the main perspectives throughout the narrative of the added storytelling within the DLC. And while I personally enjoyed the entirety of the City That Never Sleeps pack, I still do think that there were certain aspects that Insomniac could have either improved upon or at least take out entirely. So with all of that said, let's begin with number 5 on this list, which is something that I didn't directly hate within the DLC, but is something that I do think didn't need to necessarily be included. And that obviously regards the only MJ mission within the first DLC pack chapter of the heist.
Hey, I followed up on that license plate. It's registered to a storage company owned by one of Hammerhead's old friends. I'm there now.
Give me a few minutes. I'll be there as soon as I can.
In the meantime, I'll just take a quick look around.
Now, as you can probably tell, the reason why this pick is so low on the list is because even though I didn't necessarily think it had to be included within the game, I didn't really mind it actually going on while I was playing it for the first time. Now, as a way for Insomniac to add in a little bit of comedic relief and also include the amazing reference that we all know and love with pizza time, Peter did at one point during the heist story take a break from all the crime fighting to enjoy one of Eddie's pizza pies. And while Peter was enjoying his meal, MJ decided to do some investigative journalism within the Maggio crime family by staking out one of their illegal money laundering operations. And even though this is a nice way to check out what MJ has been doing after the primary story of Spider-Man PS4 ended once we completed the main game, I still think this could have easily been switched out for a standard stealth section where you can play as Spidey. So even though there isn't necessarily anything wrong with MJ being featured within this part of the DLC chapter, I do think certain people were a bit irritated with having to pay even more money to play an extra MJ mission. Now, in my personal opinion, I don't have any issues with playing as MJ within the DLC, but I do understand where some people are coming from relating to her overall involvement and playability in the game, and also involving that within the DLC as well. Thus, the Mary Jane heist mission is number 5 on the worst DLC moments list.
Close as I ever want to cut it. Son of a...
Sorry.
What are you doing here? And why do you smell like pizza?
Because I just ate pizza?
Well, while you were out enjoying lunch, I was gathering evidence and trying to find a missing child.
I ate as fast as I could.
I've got stuff to follow up on. I'll call you later.
Now, moving on to number 4 is a moment that I actually was really disinterested in seeing where we finished the second chapter of Spider-Man PS4's DLC, is actually that involving turf wars. Specifically, I'm talking about the very last post-credit scene of that DLC showcasing Hammerhead in fact being alive after the events that just took place. Now, granted, Hammerhead's involvement within turf wars was shocking for 2 ways in particular relating to the ending of his narrative. The first being Yuri Watanabe coming in to actually take out Hammerhead herself, which then showcases her turn into becoming the vigilante known as the Wraith. Given the history that Yuri has with Hammerhead and the Maggio crime family, it was really intriguing to learn more about her past with Hammerhead given all the bases that you could plan during the DLC. And knowing that Hammerhead ordered the majority of his men to investigate more into Yuri Watanabe shows that he really tried to get her out of the picture so that way he could thrive within the New York crime families. So while I did initially like them ending it on a cliffhanger of sorts by the end of Turf Wars, I think that totally just made made it irrelevant after we saw the post-credit scene of the second DLC chapter. Insomniac could have easily left this out of the DLC's post-credit scene and have it as a surprise reveal by the third chapter where Hammerhead came back as a crazy cyborg robot. Not only would this have been easier to inform the audience that Hammerhead was still alive through some audio recordings, but I also think they could have easily used this post-credit scene to set up something else. For example, the reason why I love the main post-credit scenes within the Heist and Silver Lining so much is because they not only expand on the overall universe of Spider-Man PS4, but also the main characters as well. After Peter found out that Felicia Hardy didn't actually have a child and that he wasn't a father, they gave a bit more added context to the relationship between Peter and Mary Jane. And alongside of this, the final post-credit scene within Silver Lining gave some major teases and hints to where the story is going within the inevitable sequel. So knowing that Peter and Mary Jane's relationship will expand even further by the time the sequel releases, and knowing that Peter and Miles will both be Spider-Man within the same universe is going to be a real treat to see play out in the next game. But the only thing that the post-credit scene within Turf Wars did is just set up a story for the last DLC chapter of Silver Lining and nothing else. So if I were to personally change anything with the post-credit scene of Turf Wars, I would have it involve more of Yuri Watanabe instead of Hammerhead. Even though Insomniac did set up Wraith in a really cool way by the end of the Silver Lining DLC, I still think it would have been a cool way to get some more conclusion and context between Spider-Man and Yuri in a post-credit scene within Turf Wars. So besides me already thinking that Turf Wars was the least exciting DLC chapter of Spider-Man PS4's City That Never Sleeps pack, that is one of the main reasons as to why I think so. Hence why it is the fourth worst DLC moment on this list. Now moving on to the third worst moment of this particular list actually once again involves Turf Wars, but mainly relates to one specific location that you do visit during that part of the DLC's story. And what I'm referring to is of course the one and only Bar with No Name.
Bar with no name. Watering hole for New York's most notorious criminals. Last time I went in there, the fight lasted most of Labor Day weekend.
Specifically, the main aspect as to why I'm upset relating to the Bar with No Name is the fact that there weren't any memorable or iconic supervillains in this bar whatsoever. Now, if you're aware of this place's role within the comics, the Bar with No Name is one of the few supervillain hangouts within the New York City underbelly. Not only do the lowest of the low Marvel baddies hang out here, but sometimes a few notable supervillains do take place within this area. However, within the main universe of Spider-Man PS4, it seems like this is only a place for the Maggia crime families. And I'm sure that Insomniac have a lot of villains that they do want to save for the overall sequel of Spider-Man PS4, but still, I do think it would have been cool if we saw certain villains appear in this place like Shocker, Taskmaster, or someone else. And even though I did like the small aesthetics of the bar itself with the really awesome Spider-Man pinball machines and the funny conversations between the Maggia thugs, I would have liked to seen some more interesting supervillains appear at this specific joint. Or at the very least, if they couldn't actually get a character model of a specific villain in here, the least they could do is reference some other foes that do relate to Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery. Given that the Spider-Man PS4 tie-in comics do showcase some really awesome portrayals of obscure Spider-Man villains like that of Tarantula and Swarm, Insomniac could have easily inputted those names as references within the overall Bar with No Name. Now, even though this isn't a massive disappointment, I still wish that they would have done something akin to that within the overall Turf Wars DLC. And because of this, that's why it's the third worst DLC moment within Spider-Man PS4. Now, as we draw closer to the end of this list, relates to two specific picks that I did have a bit of a struggle deciding whether or not I should make it the first or second worst moment throughout the entirety of the DLC. But seeing how they both involve bad aspects relating to the overall DLC of Spider-Man PS4, I think it's safe to say that they're both equally bad in their own way. However, I do think one is obviously worse than the other, which is why the second worst DLC moment on this list relates to the giant cyborg Hammerhead. Now, in my own personal opinion, I love almost every single character within the Spider-Man PS4 universe except for that of Hammerhead. The main advertising point of the CTNS pack is that each specific chapter would focus on one villain in particular as the main character. So with the Heist, we got Black Cat, and with Silver Lining, we got more of Silver Sable, and what we were supposed to get within Turf Wars was a whole lot of Hammerhead. Oddly enough, Hammerhead only showed up during the beginning and the end of the Turf Wars story, which in turn, instead of making Hammerhead the main character of that chapter, it was actually Yuri Watanabe becoming the Wraith. And instead of fighting the classic Hammerhead that we all know and love, either from that of Spider-Man Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions or even Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro, we instead got a more modernized version of the Hammerhead character. Now this isn't anything new because this is actually quite comic book accurate, where Hammerhead did receive his own exoskeleton type suit to take on Spider-Man with. And even though that was directly showcased within Turf Wars, I think Insomniac took it a bit too far within the Silver Lining DLC. Turning Hammerhead into a giant Frankenstein-like transformer made him even more uninteresting than what he already was within Turf Wars. Plus, I thought we were actually going to see how Hammerhead transformed from his standard body into the crazy mechanized robot shell that he now has within Silver Lining. But instead, we only got a little bit of context within the audio recordings and a few pictures here and there within the Silver Lining DLC. Now, I did really like the team-up aspect between Spider-Man and Silver Sable to take out Hammerhead in the Silver Lining boss battle, but I do think it could have been a bit different instead of just going this crazy. For example, I do think the overall boss fight that we got within Turf Wars was enough to solidify Hammerhead's role in the City That Never Sleeps story. And given how he was referenced quite a few times within the main story and the DLC, I think instead of having a giant cyborg Hammerhead, we could have actually fought what could have been the main villain of Silvermane. Not only do I think this would have been another cool way to introduce another character within the Spider-Man PS4 universe, but I also think it would have added more context to the overall role of Silver Sable. Because I do think introducing a new character that directly relates to another character within the main story is a lot more interesting than just fighting a giant cyborg robot. Luckily, the ending of Silver Lining pretty much solidified Hammerhead's fate of him pretty much being out of the picture by the time that we get the sequel, so I don't expect to see any more of him anytime soon. Although I can't say the same about Silver Sable, and if she does somehow manage to appear back in the sequel, I wouldn't mind that at all because I really do love this version of her character. But to sum it up, I do believe that the cyborg Hammerhead, or what Insomniac are calling him of Hammer Hex, is indeed the second worst DLC moment for Spider-Man PS4's added content. And finally, moving on to what I believe to be the very worst aspect about the entirety of Spider-Man PS4's DLC, which is one I think we can all directly agree on, is of course the awful involvement of Screwball.
I just love reality shows, don't you?
Some people do anything for clicks.
Screwball is awful. It was bad enough dealing with her in her own unique side mission in the main game, but seeing her involvement throughout each of the individual DLC chapters throughout the Heist, Turf Wars, and Silver Lining was just flat out annoying. Now, I do completely understand what Insomniac and Marvel were trying to do here with Screwball's character in Spider-Man PS4 by making a bold statement about internet culture. The fact is that certain individuals online, specifically that of certain YouTubers, will do anything for likes and attention in order for them to grow their own brand. However, there are times where they could get a bit too obsessed with social media and care only about the public image that they have instead of who they actually are. And because of that, they end up sacrificing their own original identity and instead trade it in for something that is false and unrealistic. And while that is a very deep and powerful message to convey within a character like Screwball in Spider-Man PS4, I think we can all agree instead of having her, we could have had a character come back like that of Taskmaster. Because what's weird in my opinion is that I personally enjoyed the new challenges that we got within all the DLC chapters, but the only problem is that it involves Screwball and not a character like Taskmaster. The difference between Taskmaster and Screwball is that Taskmaster actually had some sort of a story going on with his character and his involvement within the main story of Spider-Man PS4. Not only was Taskmaster working for someone in particular, but he was also trying to recruit Spider-Man for that specific team. And instead of Screwball appearing within each of the individual chapters, I think it would have been great if Taskmaster came back instead and we got even more context about his narrative arc in the story. And it makes this even worse because we actually ended up sending Screwball to jail in her main side mission within the primary story, whereas Taskmaster actually got away once we defeated him in the main side missions. So seeing that Screwball returned even though we already initially sent her to prison only to send her back to jail by the end of Silver Lining just makes it a bit irritating to deal with that all over again. And with no utter doubt in my mind, I can genuinely say that Screwball is in fact the worst DLC moment throughout the entirety of Spider-Man PS4's City That Never Sleeps pack.
You guys know who I am, right? Of course you do. Mind if I live stream on the way to the station?
Officially unfollowed.
And with all that said, everyone, that's the video I have for you today, and please let me know all your thoughts in the comments section down below. What do you think of my top 5 worst DLC moments for Spider-Man PS4, and would you agree or disagree with some of my picks? For me personally, I do think the entirety of the City That Never Sleeps pack is a really good package overall, but still, I do think there could have been some things that Insomniac and Marvel could have changed. So here's hoping that by the time the inevitable sequel comes out with even more DLC to come, will be even bigger and better than what this originally was. And before we end the video, everyone, I do want to give another awesome mention to the incredible photo mode competition that is still going on within the Spidey Squad community. So of course, our weekly photo mode competition is still ongoing with the recent picks of the one and only webbed suit, also known as the Raimi suit, with some awesome winners for that particular competition. So of course, huge congratulations to @DannyMatt37, @SpideyPS4, @MatthewXG427, and @Talent_X2 for these amazing shots of the Raimi suit in action. If you guys know me, the advanced suit is my favorite Spider-Man costume in the entirety of the game and one of my favorite suits to date, but seeing the web suit in the game is honestly a true nostalgia trip. And seeing that some of these shots do recreate some really iconic poses of the character in action, as well as some really cool movie posters, is just awesome to see that you can do in the game. And as for another suit, which actually takes us to the future, is the white iteration of the standard 2099 suit. Now, even though I'm not the biggest fan of this suit, I still very much appreciate the different design aesthetic that it is going for. And that is definitely apparent within all these amazing individuals' pictures of the suit within the game. So huge congratulations to @ThwipNTDK, as well as @MikhailSpiderBro, and @JED, and @Spidey_Mexicano for these amazing shots. And of course, if you're someone who is very much wanting to have their pictures be showcased on the Spidey Squad social media pages, feel free to use the hashtag SpideySquadPMComp to have your photo be seen. And for the next suit that some people aren't really too big of a fan of, and is one of my personal least favorite suits of the entire game, is actually the Spider UK suit. And even though some of you may not like this suit in particular, I still encourage you to try and take as many awesome photos of you can of the suit in action. So go out there and take as many photos of Spider-Man as you possibly can. And until next time, everyone, thank you all so much for watching. Stay spectacular, Spidey fans, and peace out.
I don't do hugs.
Yeah, right. Of course. Hey, can I get a lift back to the city? I'd swim, but it'd take forever to get the river smell out of my suit.